Hey guys, this is Coop. I just wanted to go through your very first PowerPoint Google slide about Native Americans. We briefly talked about it with some of the classes we haven't. And this is the time period set right after the Civil War is over, the South is lost. But now we have to figure out what we want to do with the American West. And I bring up these images because people have an idea in their head of what they think the West is, but unfortunately, they've gotten most of their ideas from movies where there's gunfights in every town. And then they've heard of Buffalo Bill, and they've heard of Wyatt Earp, and they've heard of these bigger than life people. But there's a lot more to life out west than just these things you hear about in the movies. Now, why go west? And west is what we got right here. It's what's considered really past Mississippi River over. Namely, free land. Believe it or not, the government wanted to get people out there to expand the country, and they offered up free land by doing various things like the Homestead Act. Give you 160 acres if you would cultivate it or farm it for 5 years. You could have it. There was like a $10 application fee. That wasn't a whole lot. Okay, so most families kind of like loaded up, and you would have brothers and sisters and their families, and maybe even granddads and grandmoms, and all of them would make a trip out and take a go at farming. John Deere, yes, like the guy, the tractor, the green and yellow, he invents a steel plow, makes it easier. That's kind of where his company started from. Joseph Glidden, although there's a Glidden paint, he actually invents barbed wire because once you get out here in the plains, there's not a lot of trees in certain areas, and so you had to use barbed wire. Where do you think he got the idea from barbed wire from? Well, he's looking around at briars. Barbed wire is just little sharp woven points of wire, and it keeps the animals in an area. Life out west is terrible. They built their houses out of sod. They literally roofed their house with chunks of sod, dirt, and grass. So, if you were icky feeling about bugs and mud, then unfortunately this is not going to be a life for you. Very harsh winters because there's no trees to really kind of stop the wind from blowing. The trees act like a barrier here in Alabama. Yeah, it still gets cold, but not quite as cold as it does out west. Swarms of insects, especially locusts, would come and try and devour the plants that you grew. Everybody in the family worked. As soon as you were old enough, you were working, and little kids were working. It is lonely and isolated. There is no Walmart to run to, or really there's not even a hospital to run to. So you're out there with just a small group of people. Hey, the dating scene for you teenagers would have been very slim, had some slim pickings on the dating scene. One thing that does change the West is gold. People go nuts for gold. Once gold is discovered, and it could be silver and copper, all three minerals are valuable. Flooding of people in an area occurs. Somebody makes a strike. Tons of people come in and try to find their bit of gold. On average, only really about 18% of the people, of the thousands that went in, would find any gold. Okay? That's not even saying that they're going to make a huge living from it. That just goes to show you that gold, it was very hard for a small little miner to find gold. They use something called placer mining, and that's what you might have seen on TV, like this little cartoon character on the right over here. Using a pan with little ridges in it, gold settles to the bottom, and if you do it just right, all the other stuff floats away, and the gold's sitting at the bottom. Larger companies use quartz mining. That's basically washing away an entire mountainside looking for the gold. The gold does not grow in the creek. The gold grows in the mountain. Water runs through the mountain. Will occasionally flick off little pieces of gold that wash its way down the creek. What you're looking for is the vein of that gold, silver, or copper. Big companies could spend the money to come in and look for that vein. The Comstock lode was one of the largest, most richest lodes, and it was silver, not gold, too, near 6 Mile Canyon. But if you go there today, there's not many people there. It's like a boom town and ghost town. As soon as the gold or silver's discovered and word gets out, people flood in, and you're going to have people like bars, prostitution, shops kind of like a Lowe's where you go get material to mine the gold. Any form of gambling, boxing. It was really a rough place to hang around. You would not want to hang around a mining town because the whole point for these companies was to get these miners drunk and try to swindle them out of some gold. Raising cattle became another big thing in the South, especially these longhorn cattle. Now, these longhorn cattle had been there since the Spanish. They had kind of escaped, and they've learned to adapt. These big horns act like radiators, helps them keep cool. They could survive out west. They could basically eat scruffy grass, bark off a tree, and live. You're allowed to roam free and breed. Now, how do you determine what's your cow? Farmers came along and started to brand cows, which is basically burning their initials in their butt. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. Okay. Remember, cowhide, this leather, it hurt. Yes. I'm not going to sit there and lie. It didn't. They would brand inside the hind part of the calf. During several times of the year, the cowboys, where we get that term, would round up some of the cattle, drive them to a railhead, which is where an area of a train tracks, and they had ramps where they could load the cattle onto cattle cars to take back east to the meat department, slaughterhouse, turn them into food. So let's talk about the cowboys. The image of the cowboy is, people, I want to dress like a cowboy for Halloween, and we think we have this idea of what a cowboy is. However, in real life, cowboy life was rough. Most of these cowboys were young, and a lot of them didn't live to be old. It's a dangerous life. Things they had to worry about. Stampedes. Cattle have a tendency to get scared and like take off running, and the cows behind them don't even know why they're running, and they're just like, oh crap, something's going on, I better run too. And it's hard to stop a stampede with you just on a horse. Plus, you had to worry about cattle thieves. People come in the middle of the night, kill the cowboys, steal the cows. That's not counting things like rattlesnakes, bears, wolves, just drinking the water, getting sick for typhoid. So it would have been very similar to something like we were seeing with COVID, where you're drinking water that has this bacteria in it, and that's how you're getting sick. I know you don't get sick by COVID that way, but there were sicknesses that they were dealing with that you did. That you got sick by drinking water, bad water. And the pay wasn't low, or the was low, I'm sorry. Danger level super high. So life of a cowboy was not quite as romantic and awesome as it would make you would think based off the movies. Cattle ranching was profitable for many years, but anytime you have more of something being raised, drives the price down. Okay, I always use the analogy of Air Jordans. They don't release 6 billion pair of Air Jordans. They only release a set number. That's what keeps Air Jordans value. If they released 60 billion pairs of Air Jordans where everybody could just about buy one, then that probably is going to take the value down. Okay, so when everybody out west, a lot of them start raising cattle, it's going to drive the price of cattle down. Then farmers began fencing in their land, called the enclosure movement. They didn't have to travel as far. Railroads were being spread, so they decided that the new cattle farm was going to be fenced in, and you had your cows there, and the railroad would maybe make a spur of the railroad by your ranch. It's called some wars, though, because some cowboys were still transporting their cattle free range across others' lands, and for a while there, that had just been kind of this unspoken rule of you can do that. You can come across my land as long as you don't tear it up or anything. Well, that stopped, and believe it or not, that caused some little tiny shoot-offs between several ranches and their cowboys. The other problem is the Indians. So most of the Indians that lived where we are here in Alabama were moved west and forgotten about for the longest period of time. That's going to change, and you might have guessed it, when they discover gold and silver on this land. When gold and silver is discovered on the Indian lands, well, guess what? That land becomes valuable, and we try to move the Indians off of it. Building of the railroads brought more and more and more, quote unquote, Eastern European white people into the Indian lands that wanted to settle. This is obviously going to lead to conflicts between the Indians and the settlers. And you can understand why the Indians are mad. They're tired of being pushed off their land. The Indians, though, at this point, their biggest food source is the buffalo. So the Indians don't live in one little place. That's why they use teepees like you guys see in movies. The teepee was like an RV. They could pick it up and move it and follow the buffalo. But conflict between whites, mostly, and Indians is going to lead to some massacres. Here's a crazy one. So John Chivington is, if you'll notice, he is a militiaman. What that means is he's kind of like Billy and his buddies gather in a bar once a while, have meetings, and then maybe once a month they train. He's not really officially an army, okay? Some settlers are coming through, and a cow gets loose and wanders over to a Indian tribe where they've got their stuff set up. The whites want the cow back. The Indians are trying to give the cow back, but because of the language barrier, the white settlers get scared, leave the cow, take off, because to them, the Indian yelling makes them think that they're about to kill them. Well, they make it to this town, Colorado. John Chivington hears about it. Of course, he's like, we're going to go catch this thief and hang him because he stole a cow. And he goes back and proceeds to massacre between 100 and 250 Cheyenne Indians under a Chief Black Kettle. And that's not 100 to 250 warriors. That's women, men, and children, old people, young people, most of them shot in the back, all because of a misunderstanding over a cow. This goes to show you how very little most whites regarded Indians. They didn't view them as even human. Black Hills has always been it's an old mountain range. This is a picture of them, and it looked unique. It's kind of unlike other mountains. The Sioux tribe thought it was sacred. They would go bury their dead up on the tops of these peaks. Unfortunately, gold is discovered there. Prospectors move in. That's guys looking for the gold. And the army is sent in because the government wants a chunk of gold. The government's in debt after the Civil War. And this is going to lead to another war between the U.S. and Native Americans, probably the bigger part of it. So there's a river, the Battle of Little Bighorn. Two really well thought of amongst the Indians chiefs, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, have teamed up. And they've got a lot of warriors. They got several thousand warriors between the two of them. Yeah, I've heard estimates higher than that too. That's just warriors, not counting women and children. We send George Custer in the 7th Cavalry. He attacks the Indians at the Little Bighorn. Now, he'd done several dumb things. He'd split his army twice because he wanted the glory of capturing Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. He really had too much faith in the technological advance that his army had with better rifles over the Indians. Technology can help you a little bit, not when you're outnumbered 3,000 to 260, which was basically what they were going up against. He had around 260 men. The Indians had more than 3,000. You can see where this ended up. Some of you classes, I've already talked about the art. This was probably more realistic. This is why I put it in there. He's down. Most of his men are dead. He's hiding low as he can. And if you'll look, though, that Indian looks like he's got a bead on him, so he ain't going to be alive much longer. Custer and all 265 of his men are killed. The only ones that survived, if you've seen that video clip I showed you, were the ones coming up the other end that encountered the two young boys. And if you haven't seen that clip, you will today. Some of them survived, and that was the way they were able to tell the story. Last great victory for the Indians, though, they don't have another. Nez Perce, Chief Joseph, he decides, okay, you don't want me here, I'm going to try to leave, and he refuses to give up his land until they force him to, and he is going to try and run to Canada. Now, I don't know why they didn't let him just go to Canada, but the Army chased him and captured him literally 14 miles from the border of Canada, brought him back to a reservation. Never really understood that. I don't know why they just didn't let him go to Canada. Let him and his people live there. Geronimo, Apaches, Comanches, these were the toughest of the tough. They lived and played around down in Texas and Arizona and Nevada in the hot, hot desert. You sent troops after them, they sent body parts back. Who actually eventually puts an end? The Army got tired of sending white troops down there and getting them massacred. So they said, we'll send the all-black unit, the Buffalo Soldiers. And they finally captured Geronimo. So the Buffalo Soldiers were the ones who go down. And you're going to hear about them again, too, in the World War I chapter. I'm sorry, the Spanish-American War chapter. They're the ones that actually go down and they begin to live kind of like the Apaches and just they're tough. And they eventually will capture Geronimo and put an end to this Apache uprising. Wounded Knee. We saw a little bit about this. You guys that saw the video clips, the other ones will. They were attempting to disarm the Sioux. They were dancing, okay, to their ancestors to try and get clearance to see a vision. What they were doing was hallucinating. So the Army goes into an attempt to disarm them. A lot of young troops. 200 women, men, and children are massacred. These are real pictures. It's cold. Shot them where they're at. Sad things that I always notice when in some of these pictures, like this one here. I hope you guys can see my mouse. I think there was a little function. I think this might be it. Hang on. Yeah. Hang on one second. Yeah. Okay. You should be able to see like a spotlight. This Indian right here, I always bring my attention to him because he has his hands up in front of his face. It's a defensive measure. You know, you put that up when you don't have a weapon, but somebody is coming at you with a weapon. So most of these Indians that you see out there, most of them were not armed. And these young soldiers, some of these soldiers were replacements for the ones that had died under Custer. So they're nervous. They've heard all these crazy stories about how Indians will eat you and all this stuff out east. So they're trigger happy. And then you see what happens as a result. Men and women and children die because of their trigger happiness. Last thing that the government does is the buffaloes. The buffalo is used for everything by the Indians, and I mean every part is used by from the buffalo. That's the Indians' main food source. But they're going to die out, and believe it or not, they almost went extinct. Railroad crews would kill them for food. They brought hunters out just to kill them, just for their hides. And then the Army started riding trains, just shooting the buffalo and letting them rot on the ground, because you can't eat rotten meat, and that forced the Indians on reservations. Reservations were being controlled by the military, not a good place to live. It's land that nobody else wants. You can't really hunt and farm on it. They come dependent on the government. Here's your picture. You see basically all the Indians. And then there's a massive fort overlooking at them. The guns are pointed to them. Not bad. I want to stop with this because Dawes Act, I'm not going to talk about it yet. I want to talk about it separate because I want to show you guys some pictures. So look over this. You will have some questions about this. I'm going to go back and put in some questions. So you'll have some questions that'll be due for probably the first part of next week. Okay. Go back, look at it a few times. This is where your test is going to come from the guided reading and from what I've talked about on when we have our live sessions, and then this. Okay. talk to you guys later.